I keep thinking about the silence, not the absence of sound, because there was never true silence on Praxis the Seventh, not with the grinding of extraction engines and the constant drone of ore processors and the wheeze of atmospheric recyclers working overtime to keep the thin air breathable. No, this was something else. This was a silence that existed underneath all that noise, a silence that I now understand had been there all along, waiting, listening. I was the senior administrator for Mining Cluster Theta 7, a position I had held for 11 standard years, and in all that time I had never noticed that silence until the day we breached the black stone chamber 3 kilometers beneath the rust-colored surface. After that, I could hear nothing else. My name is Marcus Devlin, and I am recording this account because someone needs to understand what happened here. Someone needs to know what we found, what we woke, and why no evacuation order will ever come in time. The astropathic relay went dark 6 days ago. The orbital station stopped responding 4 days after that. I am writing this in the emergency bunker beneath Administrative Hub Prime, and the walls are starting to vibrate with a frequency I cannot identify but which I feel in my teeth, in my bones, in the fluid of my eyes. I do not know how much time I have left. I do not know if time means anything anymore. Praxis the Seven was never a hospitable world. The atmosphere was thin and toxic, requiring full filtration masks for any extended surface work. The temperature swung between scorching daylight and freezing darkness, with only a few hours of tolerable conditions at dawn and dusk. The ground was rich with rare minerals essential to the Mechanicus forges, which was the only reason the Imperium had bothered to establish a presence here at all. We numbered perhaps 12,000 souls spread across 7 mining clusters, with the main administrative hub and landing facilities at the planet's equator. I had been transferred here from a hive world processing center, a promotion in title, but a demotion in comfort, and I had spent the first 3 years hating every moment. Then I learned to stop feeling much of anything at all. That numbness served me well. It kept me functional through equipment failures and worker riots and the constant attrition of accidents and disease. It kept me signing death certificates and production reports with the same steady hand. I thought that numbness would protect me from whatever came next. The first anomaly was reported 17 days ago by Excavation Team Gamma 1-2. They had been drilling a new shaft in Sector 9, following a promising vein of adamantine ore that our surveyors had detected several months prior. Standard procedure, routine work. The drill operator, a veteran named Corbin Shaw, submitted a report that the drill had struck something unusual at the 2.8-kilometer mark. The resistance pattern did not match any known mineral composition. He described it as neither stone nor metal, but something that felt like both simultaneously, something that made his drill teeth skip and shriek in ways he had never heard in 30 years of operation. I authorized a geological survey team to investigate. This was my first mistake, though I did not know it then. Everything that followed stems from that single authorization, that casual signature on a routine form. I have the form in front of me now. My handwriting looks so normal, so unconcerned. I want to burn it, but I know the burning would change nothing. The geological team reported back within 2 days. Their findings were unusual enough that I remember reading the report twice, frowning at the language they used. They described a layer of unknown material approximately 40 meters thick, composed of a crystalline metallite hybrid that did not appear in any Imperial geological database. More concerning was the structure beneath. Using deep scan equipment, they detected what appeared to be artificial formations, regular geometric patterns, hollow spaces, and what they hesitantly identified as corridors. The team leader, a woman named Dr. Yuki Tanaka, theorized that we had discovered Xenos ruins of unknown origin, possibly predating human settlement in this sector by millions of years. She recommended immediate notification to the Mechanicus representative on world and suspension of drilling operations pending further investigation. I agreed with her recommendation. I sent the notification. I waited for a response that would take far too long to arrive. Brother Inginseer Matthias Kron was the sole representative of the machine cult on Praxis the Seven, a hunched figure, more metal than flesh, who spent most of his time maintaining our ore processors and rarely spoke to anyone outside technical necessity. When I showed him Dr. Tanaka's report, something changed in his augmented face. The cluster of optical sensors that served as his eyes flickered through several spectrums, and his mechadendrites twitched in patterns I had never seen before. He asked to see the scan data immediately. I provided it. He spent 9 hours studying the images in absolute stillness, not even the subtle servo whine of his breathing apparatus breaking the silence of his workshop. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost its usual monotone cadence. He asked me if I understood what the geometric patterns represented. I told him I did not. He said they were consistent with certain forbidden texts in the Mechanicus archives, records of an ancient enemy that predated the Imperium, predated humanity, predated all known sentient life in the galaxy. He said we needed to seal the excavation immediately and request military assistance. He said this with something I had never heard from a tech priest before: fear. I should have listened to him. The Emperor, forgive me. I should have sealed that shaft and flooded it with rossite and prayed we had not disturbed whatever slept beneath. But the production quotas were already behind schedule. The tithe collectors would arrive in 3 months. The penalties for shortfall would fall on my head, on my record, on the families of every worker who depended on this operation for their survival. I convinced myself that Matthias was being overcautious, that his religious superstitions were clouding his technical judgment. I authorized a limited exploration of the site, just enough to determine if it posed any immediate danger to mining operations. I told myself I was being reasonable. I told myself I was balancing risks. I told myself so many things that let me sleep at night. The exploration team entered the structure on day 12. There were 8 of them. 5 miners with excavation experience, 2 security officers, and Dr. Tanaka herself, who insisted on being present for what she called the xenoarchaeological discovery of the century. They wore full environmental suits with integrated vox links, helmet-mounted pictcasters, and enough emergency supplies to survive underground for 3 days. I monitored their progress from the administrative hub, watching grainy footage as they descended through the shaft we had cut into the crystalline layer. The material around them glinted with an inner light that our equipment could not explain, a pale green luminescence that seemed to pulse at irregular intervals. The temperature readings fluctuated wildly, sometimes freezing, sometimes impossibly warm, defying all thermal modeling. One of the miners, a young man named Torres, kept asking if anyone else could hear humming. No one else reported any sound. The first chamber they found was immense. Our estimates put it at roughly 200 meters across and nearly 50 meters high, carved from that same impossible crystalline metal substance. The walls were covered in glyphs that Dr. Tanaka's translation software could not parse, angular symbols that hurt to look at for too long. She noted in her running commentary that the symbols seemed to shift when viewed from different angles, though our pictcaster footage showed no such movement. At the center of the chamber stood a platform raised perhaps 3 meters above the floor, accessible by steps that seemed too tall for human legs, too precisely cut, too perfectly preserved, after what must have been millions of years. On the platform rested a sarcophagus of black metal, its surface etched with more of those migraine-inducing symbols. Dr. Tanaka approached it with her scanner extended. She reported that the sarcophagus contained a power source of unknown type, still active after all this time, generating the readings that had confused our deep scan equipment. She said it was beautiful, in a terrible way. She said it made her think of tombs she had seen as a child, the sepulchres of saints in the great cathedrals. Except older, so much older, older than saints, older than cathedrals, older than the species that had built them. I ordered her to fall back. Something in her voice had changed, had taken on a dreamy quality that made the hair on my arms stand rigid. She did not respond to my order. None of them did. The vox links were still transmitting, but my voice did not seem to reach them. I watched through the pictocaster as Dr. Tanaka climbed those 2 tall steps, her movements slow and deliberate, as if she were walking through deep water. She placed her hand on the surface of the sarcophagus. The green luminescence in the walls flared brilliant for a single moment. Then the Pictocaster feeds died, all 8 of them simultaneously, leaving me staring at static and darkness. We sent a second team 4 hours later, armed this time, with explicit orders to retrieve the first team and withdraw immediately. They found the chamber empty. No sign of the exploration team. No sign of struggle. No blood or discarded equipment, or any evidence that 8 human beings had ever stood in that ancient space. The sarcophagus was gone. In its place was only a perfect circle of blackened stone, as if something had been removed by means that vaporized everything around it. One of the security officers in the second team reported hearing that same humming the miner Torres had mentioned, except louder now, more complex, with harmonics that seemed to form words in a language he did not know, but somehow almost understood. I ordered immediate evacuation of Sector 9. I sealed the shaft with explosive charges. I told myself the problem was contained. 3 days later, the disappearances began in Sector 4, nearly 800 kilometers from the original excavation. A maintenance crew vanished during a routine inspection of ventilation systems. Then a transport convoy failed to arrive at its destination. All 12 vehicles and 37 personnel simply gone, their last known position placing them directly above one of our subsidiary mining tunnels. Then an entire residential block in Mining Cluster Beta 3 went silent overnight. 400 workers and their families discovered missing by the morning shift, their quarters undisturbed, their breakfast half-eaten on tables, their work boots still lined up by their doors. No bodies, no blood, no explanation, just absence, spreading like a stain across the face of Praxis 7. Brother Engineer Matthias came to me on day 14 with documents he should not have possessed. He said he had sent an emergency request to his superiors on Mars, violating approximately 17 different protocols in the process, and had received a partial response before our long-range communications failed. The response confirmed his fears. The geometric patterns we had detected matched records in the most restricted archives of the machine cult, records describing an ancient machine race that had ruled the galaxy before humanity's ancestors had crawled from the oceans of old Earth. The texts called them the Undying Ones, entities of living metal who had traded their flesh for immortality and then slept through the ages, waiting for the time of their return. Their tomb worlds were scattered across the galaxy, dormant but not dead, their inhabitants dreaming in the cold darkness of epochs. The texts said that disturbing their slumber was among the most catastrophic errors any Imperial force could make. The texts described what happened to worlds that woke them. The descriptions were not detailed. They did not need to be. The words total population loss appeared repeatedly, followed by lengthy sections that had been redacted in black. I asked Matthias why the Mechanicus had not warned us about this possibility before we began mining operations. His optical sensors dimmed in what might have been shame or simply power fluctuation. He said the records were ancient and fragmentary. He said most worlds where these tomb complexes existed showed no surface indication of their presence. He said probability calculations suggested the risk was minimal. He said he was sorry. I told him his apology was noted. I did not tell him that apologies meant nothing now, that probability calculations meant nothing, that the entire weight of Imperial bureaucracy and Mechanicus theology meant nothing against the reality unfolding beneath our feet. I think he knew anyway. I think he had known from the moment he saw those geometric patterns, had known and hoped he was wrong, and was now watching his worst fears manifest with the terrible clarity of vindicated prophecy. The ground began to shake on day 15. Not the tremors we occasionally felt from deep mining operations, but something rhythmic, something almost organic, as if the planet itself had developed a heartbeat. Our seismic equipment recorded the source as coming from multiple points simultaneously, spreading outward from the original excavation site in Sector 9, but also from locations we had never drilled, never mapped, never suspected might contain anything other than ore and stone. The readings suggested massive structures rising through the bedrock, pushing aside millions of tons of material as easily as a swimmer breaks through water. By nightfall, the first of them had reached the surface. I will try to describe what I saw, though I know my words will fail. The footage no longer exists, the data stacks corrupted by electromagnetic interference that our technicians could not explain, so all I have is memory, and memory is a poor vessel for comprehending the incomprehensible. They emerged from the rust-colored earth like nightmares taking physical form, metal skeletons bathed in that same green luminescence we had first observed in the chamber below. They were shaped roughly like men, but wrong in every proportion. Too tall, too angular, their limbs jointed in places where no joint should be, their skulls elongated and hollow, their eyes pits of burning emerald that seemed to see through flesh and stone alike. They carried weapons that hummed with barely contained energy, staffs and rifles of black metal that discharged beams of absolute destruction, beams that did not merely kill but unmade, reducing whatever they touched to constituent atoms and then scattering those atoms to the void. They moved with mechanical precision, unhurried, unstoppable, as if time itself was merely an inconvenience they had long since learned to ignore. And behind them, rising from the broken earth, came their masters. The Overlords were the sarcophagi made mobile, armored figures of black metal and baleful light, draped in ragged cloaks that might once have been royal vestments, their skeletal faces frozen in expressions of ancient contempt. One of them led the emergence in Sector 4, a towering construct easily 3 meters tall, its staff crackling with green fire, its movements suggesting not merely intelligence but personality, pride, the certainty of absolute superiority. It surveyed the mining structures around it with what I can only describe as disdain, as if our works were the scribblings of insects, momentary impermanence in the face of its eternal existence. Then it raised its staff, spoke a single word in a language that made my ears bleed even through the Vox speakers, and our ore processing facility collapsed into a crater of vitrified glass. The workers inside did not even have time to scream. The evacuation order went out within the hour, though we all knew it was already too late. The orbital station had gone silent. The handful of shuttles we had planetside were barely enough to carry a fraction of our population, and the machine horrors were emerging from the ground faster than we could track them. I watched from the administrative hub as our security forces attempted to establish defensive perimeters, las rifles and stubbers, and the few heavy weapons we possessed, crackling against the advancing metal tide. Our weapons did nothing. I saw las beams splash harmlessly against necrodermis plating. I saw shells ricochet from skeletal frames without leaving so much as a scratch. I saw brave men and women firing until their power packs ran dry, then drawing combat knives and charging forward to meet their deaths with Imperial defiance. And I saw those deaths accomplish nothing, change nothing, slow the advance by not even a single step. The machine dead walked through our defenses like wind through empty corridors, and where they walked, humanity ceased to exist. Brother Engincia Matthias was the one who finally explained what was happening. His voice transmitted to all remaining personnel through our dying Vox network, a final sermon from a priest who had found his faith tested and broken by something older than faith itself. He spoke of biotransference, of an ancient process by which these beings had surrendered their organic forms to become immortal machines, trading sensation and emotion and the warmth of living flesh for cold eternity. He spoke of dynasties that had ruled when our sun was young, of wars fought against gods and demons and the crawling chaos of dimensions beyond counting. He spoke of the Great Sleep, millions of years of dormancy while they waited for the lesser races to rise and fall and rise again, waited for the galaxy to forget their names, waited for the moment when they would emerge and reclaim what had always been theirs. He spoke of us, humanity, the Imperium, our 10,000 years of history and struggle and sacrifice, and he said we were nothing to them, less than nothing, barely worthy of notice, certainly not worthy of hatred or respect, or even acknowledgement as thinking beings. We were vermin in a house that had briefly sat vacant. The owners had returned. The extermination was not personal, it was simply necessary. I asked him, in that final conversation, what had happened to Dr. Tanaka and her team. His optical sensors flickered through spectrums I could not see, and his reply was soft, almost gentle, as if he were delivering news to a grieving family. He said they had likely been taken by the tomb's automated defense systems, preserved for later examination or conversion. He said the machine dead sometimes did this with specimens they found interesting, biological curiosities from a galaxy that had changed while they slept. He said it was possible they were still alive, in some sense of the word, their consciousness trapped in metal bodies that would never age, never tire, never die, serving masters they could not understand in a civilization they could never escape. He said this fate was considered by some to be worse than death. He said he was sorry. I asked him to stop apologizing. He said he understood, and then his signal cut out, and I never heard his voice again. The administrative hub fell on day 16. I survived only because I was in the sub-basement archives when the assault began, reviewing old geological surveys in a desperate search for information about other potential tomb sites, as if knowing where they were could somehow help us avoid them. The building above me shook, collapsed, and sealed me into this emergency bunker with enough supplies to last perhaps 2 weeks, and no way to communicate with anyone who might still be alive. I have spent the days since then listening to the sounds that filter through 3 meters of reinforced rockcrete. Sounds that I can describe but cannot fully process, sounds that my mind refuses to organize into coherent patterns. There is the constant hum, that same harmonic vibration that Taurus noticed in the chamber, except now it fills the air like a physical presence, making my thoughts sluggish, making sleep impossible, making me wonder if the vibration is doing something to my brain that I will not recognize until it is far too late. There are voices sometimes, or things that might be voices, synthetic approximations of human speech that call out names and offer promises that make no sense, promises of service and eternity and transcendence, promises that part of me wants to believe even though I know believing means something worse than death. There are footsteps on the rubble above, metal feet, striking stone in precise mechanical rhythms, searching, always searching, patient beyond any human understanding of patience. I have reviewed the planetary defense logs that were cached in the bunker's data core. The records are incomplete, corrupted by the same electromagnetic interference that has plagued all our systems since the Awakening began, but they paint a picture I wish I could unsee. The orbital station did not simply go silent. It was boarded by vessels that rose from the planet's surface, craft of impossible geometry that our sensors barely registered before they were upon us. The crew of the station, 300 men and women, were taken alive according to the final transmissions. Taken where, taken for what purpose, the logs do not say. Perhaps they do not need to say. The shuttle that attempted to escape was struck down by weapons fire from the surface, its debris scattered across 1,000 kilometers of rust-colored desert. The long-range Vox array that might have warned other Imperial worlds was destroyed in the first wave of attacks, its tower melted into slag by those terrible green beams. We died in silence, as so many worlds have died throughout humanity's long history. Our screams swallowed by the void, our fates unknown to anyone who might have cared. But here is what haunts me most. Here is what I cannot stop turning over in my mind, as the hours blur together, and the humming grows louder, and my supplies dwindle toward nothing. It is the memory of those first scan images, the geometric patterns that Matthias recognized from his forbidden texts. The patterns were not random. They were not the chaotic structures of abandoned ruins or collapsed civilizations. They were organized, systematic, covering an area far larger than our mining operations had ever explored. I have been reviewing the data, cross-referencing it with surface surveys, and I have come to a conclusion that makes me want to weep. The tomb complex beneath Praxis 7 is not a single structure. It is a network, a vast underground city spanning thousands of cubic kilometers, and our 12 years of mining operations had barely scratched its surface. We thought we were extracting resources from dead stone. We were living atop a sleeping army numbering in the millions, perhaps the billions, an army that our clumsy excavations had finally disturbed. The awakening we triggered in Sector 9 was not an isolated incident. It was a signal, a call to rise, a command that rippled out through that impossible network and roused sleepers who had waited since before humanity's first ancestors had learned to walk upright. They are not stopping at Praxis 7. I am certain of this now, certain with the bone-deep conviction of a man who has seen too much to hope otherwise. The dynasties of the machine dead do not think in terms of single worlds or single systems. They think in terms of galactic conquest, of reclamation on a scale that makes the Imperium's 10,000 years look like the briefly flickering candle of a child's birthday celebration. This world was merely a garrison, a single outpost in an empire that once spanned the stars, and now that its sentinels have woken, they will reach out to their brothers, their kin, their legion of undying warriors scattered across a galaxy that has forgotten their name. They will find other worlds where their kind sleeps. They will send the signal that rouses those sleepers. They will march again as they marched in ages past, and this time there will be no force capable of stopping them, no ancient enemy, no young god, no desperate alliance of the living against the dead. The galaxy will burn with green fire, and when the flames die down, only metal will remain. The footsteps above have stopped. The humming has changed pitch, shifted to something that feels almost like speech, almost like a question being asked. I think they know I am here. I think they have known all along, have simply been waiting for some purpose I cannot fathom. Perhaps they want me to finish this record. Perhaps they want someone to document what happened here, to leave a warning for others who might stumble upon their tombs, or perhaps they simply find it amusing that their victims would waste their final hours scratching words into data slates that no one will ever read. I do not know. I cannot know. The gap between their minds and mine is too vast, too ancient, too fundamental to bridge with anything as crude as language or logic. The ceiling above me has begun to glow. Green light seeps through cracks I did not notice before, cracks that widen as I watch, as if the rockcrete itself is being unmade at the molecular level. They are coming for me now. I can feel it in the vibration of my bones, in the strange calm that has settled over my thoughts, in the certainty that has replaced the terror I should be feeling, but somehow cannot find anymore. I wonder if this is what Torres felt when he heard the humming, if this is what Dr. Tanaka felt when she touched the sarcophagus, this quiet acceptance, this surrender to something so far beyond human understanding that resistance becomes meaningless. I hope not. I hope they fought until the very end, defied their captors with every breath, maintained their humanity in the face of eternity. But I suspect they did not. I suspect they went quietly, just as I am going quietly, just as this world went quietly, just as humanity itself may go quietly when the final reckoning comes. The wall is opening now. I can see them through the gap, metal skeletons wreathed in emerald fire, their hollow eyes fixed upon me with something that might be curiosity, or might be contempt, or might be nothing at all, just the cold calculation of machines assessing a new specimen for their collection. Behind them stands one of the Overlords, the same towering figure I saw emerge in Sector 4, its skeletal face somehow managing to convey satisfaction despite its lack of flesh or expression. It raises one metal hand, gestures toward me, and I feel my body move without my conscious command, rising from my chair, walking toward the gap in the wall, walking toward whatever fate awaits me in the endless green darkness of their eternal domain. I want to leave you with something meaningful. I want to leave you with a warning, a lesson, some fragment of wisdom that might help others avoid our fate. But I have nothing. There is no wisdom in this. There is no lesson except the oldest and most terrible truth of the universe, that we are small, that we are brief, that we are nothing against the vast and hungry dark. The machine dead ruled the stars before we had learned to make fire. They will rule the stars after our bones have crumbled to dust, and our monuments have weathered to nothing, and the last whisper of our existence has faded from the cosmic background radiation. This is not tragedy. This is not even horror. Not really. It is simply the way of things, the natural order of a universe that never cared about us, never noticed our struggles, never marked our passing. We are the dream of mayflies, and the sleepers have woken, and the dream is ending. The Overlord is speaking now. I do not understand the words, but I feel them, feel their meaning pressing into my mind like fingers through soft clay. It asks me questions. It wants to know about the Imperium, about humanity, about the 10,000 years of history that unfolded while it slept. It is patient. It has all the time in the universe. It will have all the time until the stars go dark, until the last proton decays, until entropy claims even the immortal and only silence remains. I will answer its questions. I will tell it everything I know, not because I am brave or defiant, but because I am nothing. I have always been nothing, and nothing is what nothing does. Perhaps my information will help it. Perhaps it will help its kind reclaim the galaxy faster, more efficiently, with less resistance. Perhaps I am betraying everything I ever believed in, everything the Imperium stands for, everything humanity has fought to preserve. But the fighting is over now. The fighting was over the moment we breached that black stone chamber. Everything since then has just been the dying, the slow acceptance of what was always inevitable. I am walking into the green light now. The Overlord's hand rests on my shoulder, cold metal against my threadbare uniform, guiding me forward with terrible gentleness. Behind me, my data slate sits on the floor of the bunker, recording these final words, waiting for someone who will never come. I hope they find it anyway. I hope they read it. I hope they understand. The machine dead are waking. Across 1,000 worlds, in 1,000 tombs that have sat silent for 60 million years, they are stirring, rising, remembering who they were and what they ruled. The green fire is spreading. The old empire is being rebuilt, and there is nothing at all, that anyone can do to stop it. The light consumes me now. My final thought is of Dr. Yuki Tanaka, of her voice when she described the tomb as beautiful in a terrible way. She was right. It is beautiful. The patterns on the walls, the precision of the architecture, the elegant mathematics of their technology, all of it is beautiful, beautiful and terrible and eternal. I think I understand now why she touched the sarcophagus. I think I understand why she walked toward it without hesitation, why Torres kept listening to the humming, why we all kept digging even when every instinct screamed at us to stop. We were moths, and they were the flame, and flame is beautiful, and moths are nothing, and nothing burns just as brightly as everything else when the fire finally comes. This is what happens when the Overlords awaken from their slumber. This is what happens. This is what hap.